The fight over financial compensation for volunteer firefighters has deepened, with the New South Wales RFS Commissioner slapping down comments by the Firefighters Union. It comes as both the Prime Minister and opposition leaders spent Christmas Eve in fire zones. Scott Morrison spent the morning touring the fire-ravaged areas in the Adelaide Hills, meeting with volunteers and local residents. He spoke to media from Mount Barker a short time ago, where he announced extra leave for volunteer firefighters in the public service.
Well, thank you, Premier, and to Anne Ruston, the Minister for Social Services. Great to have you here with us, and Commissioner and local incident controller. Richard, thank you very much for the opportunity to come and thank your team here today and the volunteers who are outside serving up meals to our firefighters. And Stephen, can I thank you as a New South Welshman on behalf of all of those in New South Wales for the tremendous support that South Australia has provided to those devastating fires also in New South Wales. I remember when the first crew was loading up here in South Australia and heading over, you sent me a picture of it, and it was so encouraging. And 1,500 South Australian firefighters have been over helping their fellow Australians in New South Wales. And on behalf of all of my friends and colleagues, the men and women of New South Wales, thank South Australians very, very much for your generosity, and particularly even now, when you're facing your own challenges here in South Australia, there are still South Australians there. Now, they'll be coming back, of course they will, because there are needs here now, and that's why I'm here today. The fires in New South Wales have obviously been terrible, but they're not the only place where there are fires. There are fires here in South Australia, there are fires in Victoria, there are fires in Queensland. And I want to also commend the premiers of all of those states, as well as in New South Wales, for the tremendous job they're doing in leading the operational response, and the fire chiefs that sit underneath them that is doing a tremendous job. This Cuddly Creek fire here, and how quickly it moved, and the devastation that it's wreaked, and over 80 homes lost in South Australia just in the last week or so. And the destruction to businesses that have taken a lifetime to build, particularly vineyards and things like this, which so much underpin the tourism industry and the economy of the Adelaide Hills. This will all have to be rebuilt, but the great spirit of the community, as we saw out there this morning, the way they've stood up centres, the way they've helped each other, the way they've case managers provided accommodation for those who need it. And out in the Lowenthal village tonight, there will be their usual Christmas light spectacular, despite all of this, as a sign, I think, of both defiance to the disaster that they've lived through, but also, I think, as a way of bringing the community together in a very special way. It is Christmas Eve after all, and kids, Santa will find you, whether there's been a bushfire or not, though he will find you, I'm sure, tonight as you go to sleep and you wake up in the morning. So it's been a privilege to be here with the Premier and to see that tremendous spirit on the ground, and over today and tomorrow, where the weather conditions are a bit more improved and enables them to deal with the spots and to deal with the flare-ups. The weather conditions will shift, and particularly as you move towards the new year, and they're in readiness here, as I've seen in the planning. Now, the other thing I wanted to announce today is that earlier today I issued a directive to all Commonwealth departments and agencies that will see the full paid leave for emergency services be lifted to a minimum standard of 4 weeks. 4 weeks. And with additional leave able to be provided by those agencies on an as-needs basis. This will lift emergency services leave to effectively what is the same standard for Defence reservists when they're called out. What this will do is a number of things. There's some 150,000 Commonwealth employees, and they're not all in Canberra. They're in Adelaide. They're on the Gold Coast. They're over in Western Australia. They're down in my home community in the Sutherland Shire in southern Sydney. They're all over the country. And they are involved in their local brigades, some of them, and what this will mean as a big employer, on top of what is done by the Defence Forces and some of these other agencies, is this will enable them to be able to commit more time in their brigades and relieve, particularly those in small and regional towns that draw their volunteers from their own self-employed arrangements or small businesses for whom the continued support to have their volunteers out fighting fires and not working in their businesses is becoming very straining. And I would be calling on, as we've been in contact today with some of the large companies, for them to also work with us on this. And I acknowledge what ANZ did yesterday in particular. I thought that showed great leadership, and I commend them for doing that. And we'd be looking for more companies to be taking that role on. This means that we'd have more people able to be deployed out of those mainly metropolitan brigades, and to be able to relieve those in country and rural areas, and allow those very tired firefighters, particularly in parts of New South Wales where they've been going for weeks on end, and that they can go home to their families and their businesses, and if you like, the reserves can come out of the cities and the metropolitan areas of Commonwealth employees and state employees. Already I know in New South Wales they have arrangements which provides for very generous leave for people on emergency services, and I think this is one thing we can very practically do right now, and that directive is effective from today. I issued it earlier today, and that will also carry a very clear requirement to other Commonwealth-related organisations like Australia Post and the AFP, and of course the Defence Force already have their own arrangements which enables them to be deployed on these issues. The other thing which we've done in the last 24 hours after consulting with commissioners and state premiers, where I've had that direct interaction, is to ensure that our ADF is taking a more forward-leaning and proactive approach with response centres like we have here in Mount Barker or anywhere else around the country. And so we can proactively be looking for those opportunities to ensure that the ADF is there and available to support in any which way they can. But I've got to tell you, they've been there already. From up in Canungra, where I was many months ago in Queensland, all the way through since September. Just this week we saw amazing support provided by the ADF, rescuing people down there on the south coast of New South Wales around Nerriga. In the very chopper I was in yesterday, as I flew across the scorched earth of the Blue Mountains, they were showing me where they were airlifting and dropping people into those places to fight those fires over the last week or so. So the ADF is very much involved, and they're leaning in. They're leaning forward to provide that support to Australians, whether in their rural communities or wherever they need to be. And I want to thank the ADF and the Minister for Defence for taking that initiative and to ensure that we're leaning into this task together. The fire season has a long way to go yet. Today may be Christmas Eve, but for so many firefighters it is going to be another day out there protecting their communities, and I thank them for their service, and I thank all those volunteers are supporting to keep them out there, and I thank their families for their forbearance. It is a time which should be a family time, and I want to thank all of the employers that are out there that are really backing in those volunteers. And it's not just the RFS or the CFS or the various state agency fire service volunteers that I'm talking about. It's St John's Ambulance, it's the emergency services, it's all the other volunteers who are out there supporting this national effort. So these are practical things that need to be done. More decisions will be taken day by day, as they have been now for many months, and we'll continue to work through the highly coordinated effort that is being run across the country. But at the end of the day, it comes down to places like where we're standing at the moment, planning and directing the response here on the ground. And I wish you, Stephen, all the best over these next few days, and all of those who are out there fighting the fires. Happy to take questions.
Prime Minister, some of these fires have been raging for months, cutting creek might be out for weeks. Is 4 weeks going to be enough? Why don't you follow ANZ's lead and make it uncapped leave?
Well, it effectively is, because if there's a requirement for any further leave beyond that, then the request needs to be made, and I could see no reason why it wouldn't be granted. What I'm effectively doing is, under the various agencies, there are some 100 agreements, and they all have various forms of leave which are written into those agreements, from a few days to a couple of weeks. I'm establishing, as the Minister for the Public Service, not just as Prime Minister, a new minimum standard that there must be 4 weeks for emergency services leave, and then additional leave can be granted on application.
Would this also apply to other emergencies, floods, those sorts of things, or just bushfires?
It will apply to all of those arrangements.
Why not offer cash or cash to firefighters, or some sort of stipend or reimbursement? Wouldn't that help volunteers on the ground more? Well,
that's not the advice that I'm receiving from the premiers or the fire commissioners. I need to restate that these fire services are run by state governments. They're not run by the federal government, And we work as a team with the state governments to determine what the priorities are in maximising the force that we can put out there on the fire ground. And we listen to those experts about what the priorities should be. And those priorities are being set by those fire commissioners in their regular hookups and in their own jurisdictions. They are being affirmed then by their own ministers and indeed premiers. And I've been in discussion with premiers about these issues. What they need is for the focus to be on the things that they say the focus should be. And I've got to back in the operational agencies that are fighting these fires.
How much is this extra leave going to cost the government?
All of the costs will be absorbed in every agency, so there'll be no net additional cost.
Prime Minister, in the last couple of days here in South Australia, we've had some scammers targeting bushfire victims, calling up, pretending to be from the bank and asking for people's bank details. What do you make of that?
I think they're scum. It makes me sick. And, you know, in these fires, we have seen the best of Australia. The overwhelming story of these fires is the best of Australians in their response. But in some cases, we've seen some ugly stuff, and they should be ashamed of themselves.
Prime Minister, you said you've been encouraging other companies to also follow suit on this. Which are the large companies, private companies, that you've reached out to?
Oh, well, they're private conversations. I'm not here to, name any or do anything like that. It's really up to each and every country, every company to make their own decisions. We're seeking to be a model employer about how we do this. We've sought to do that not just on things like this, but frankly on how quickly we pay our invoices. And we've encouraged private companies to follow us on that front as well. So this is a general encouragement and invitation to continue to join the cause. I know that these companies are already very generous in the way that they continue to provide leave, and for many it won't require much, if any, change at all. For some it might. So I invite them to make that assessment and to support that effort.
Is it tokenistic on the government's behalf, considering most of these volunteers say they would have come out anyway?
Why would you suggest that?
The volunteers I've spoken to today say they would have taken leave anyway. Unpaid, they would have come out and done their duty.
Well, I think this actually supports the effort, and I've taken this decision, I should say, particularly in consultation with the Fire Commissioner in New South Wales, as well as the Minister in New South Wales, where most of this effort is being required. I know there's a very strong effort here, Stephen, as there is in Queensland and Victoria. But this was seen as being a very practical and a very helpful thing to be doing, and was warmly welcomed when we worked through this issue yesterday. There's 150,000 Commonwealth public servants, and beyond that there's the ADF and many other agencies. And this will just provide a further opportunity for call-outs to be able to be made and people to be in a position where they can respond to those call-outs. It isn't the solution to the whole issue, but it certainly is a practical assistance. And the longer-term issues when it comes to how these things are considered, well, they'll be considered by our Chief Ministers and Premiers and myself when we come together at COAG, and the work for the things that will be considered post-fires is very much underway right now.
Were you struck by the randomness of this fire in the hills?
You always are, whether it's here in the hills or anywhere else. One home standing and the home next door is obliterated. One vineyard is flush with grapes, and the one next to it is torched. That's hard. That is just so hard. The loss is one thing, but the mystery of that is torture for those who've had to live through it. But the spirit to rebuild, the spirit to come to terms with this, and in a lot of these cases, and almost all of these cases, people who have endured these terrible losses have worked so incredibly hard to build up what was there. And they're very determined people. And my encouragement to them today has been to make access to the help that's available. People can be very resilient, and that's wonderful, but equally, whether I've seen it in floods up in North Queensland or drought or fires, people need to feel good and comfortable about reaching out to the support that's there for them. It's designed to be there for them. No one is invincible. No one can carry all of this on their own. And it's important, like we saw in the community today, just how much people are prepared to reach out and help each other.
Premier, just on the Prime Minister's directive today, obviously there are Commonwealth public servants in South Australia, but there are many more state public servants. Would you consider making the same directive?
We really welcome what the Prime Minister is doing with the Commonwealth public servants being able to take paid leave to undertake these important firefighting duties. We've had this same arrangement across the public service in South Australia for some time. There are 15 days that volunteers can take from the public service for volunteer work.
Does it need to be lifted though, 4 weeks or more?
Look, the advice is that this is what is required at the moment, but like the Prime Minister has said, you can look at issues on a case-by-case basis, and we're happy to do that in South Australia.